If you are not, thank you, Julian. And then, yeah, please, if you are not talking, mute yourself. And then you can use the chat to communicate with each other, but please do it respectfully. And of course, the recording and the slides will be available after the session. And so the hosting team for today is my three colleagues here, Julian, George, and Jennifer, and myself from ICLE, the European Secretariat. And after, before going to the webinar, we would like to make a quick poll. So basically to answer these two questions, how many of the CINTRAN events have you attended? So far we have two, this is the third one, as I said. And the second question is, what are the socioeconomic challenges that you are struggling with in your coal-intensive region? So please take a minute or 30 seconds, just don't overthink it, go with the flow and yeah, answer these questions. We have a lot of first timers actually so far. Let's see when everyone finishes. All right, I think that's okay. You can just close it. As you can see, we have a lot of people that is their first time, and only a couple that has been joining us during these three events, and some of them that have missed one. So that's okay. We hope that we can stay with us and also join us in the next four because we have 6 more to go. So for the second question, we have quite even responses. So basically, all the topics that we mentioned, attracting investment, stimulating innovative business models and startups, aligning current skills towards future skills, and also high unemployment are quite selected for everyone. And we have a couple of others. So I will highly recommend to those people that chose this one to write in the chat which are those socioeconomic challenges, because I think this could help our speakers to drive the discussion that we're going to have later. So, perfect. Now about the CINTRAN project, just basically in a nutshell, what we are trying to do in CINTRAN is unravel the challenges of the structural change that has been posed at the EU level of becoming carbon neutral by 2050, because that means that many regions that are highly dependent on fossil fuel extraction or have energy intensive industries are going to have uneven impacts. So in this project, we chose 4 of these regions: the Rhinish mining area in Germany, Silesia in Poland, Western Macedonia in Greece, and Ida-Virumaa in Estonia. And 3 of the things that we are looking at, among other things, are the pace of this transformation, the capacity of these regions to cope, but also how to adapt proactively. And we have divided all the work packages of this project into 3 clusters, basically the theory behind it, then the empirical data that we can collect. And actually today you're going to have a sneak peek of the work package 3 with our keynote speaker. And lastly, the outreach, which basically is disseminating, but also building capacity in our regional stakeholders and also policymakers. And if you're curious about it, I highly recommend you to go into this website, cintran.eu, because you will see the findings that that has been researched during the last 2 years, but also some tools such as these coping strategies and a bunch of really nice publications. I think so far we have 120. So just go and check all of that information. And as I said before, one of the part of this project is building this capacity program. Within ICLE, what we did was this needs assessment in all the core regions in Europe to know what is the knowledge that they need. And the result for that was to make this capacity building program, which is 10 webinar series plus other academy events that are not open for everyone, but are meant to help the local stakeholders and also the policymakers. And there are more webinars, as I said before, so please be sure to subscribe or find us on Twitter and LinkedIn. So the topic, as I said, is building socioeconomic resilience in at-risk regions. And we have a really nice lineup today. So as I said, we have our keynote speaker that I'm going to present in a bit, and then 3 panelists: Piotr Masłowski, the deputy mayor of Rybnik in Poland; Olga, Knez, project manager at Katapult Business Accelerator; and Karel Tichý, that works at the Economic Social Council of the Ústí region. So we are going to go first with our keynote speaker. As I said, is Zoi Vrontisi, and please let me find my notes. Sorry. Yes, Zoi Vrontisi is the director of the Economic Impact Assessment team in E3 modeling. She contributes to and coordinates several EU-funded research projects focusing on the interlinkages between sustainability development and climate policy, just transition challenges, and the socioeconomic assessment of climate risks. With more than 15 years of professional academic experience in energy and climate policy assessment, she has previously worked in the European Commission, the Greek Ministry of Development, the National Technical University of Athens, and the private sector. So we are happy to have you here, Zoi. So please, the floor is yours. You can share your screen now.
Thank you, Franco. Thanks for organizing this. Let me just share my screen. Okay. So you should be able to see the presentation.
Yes, perfect.
Good. So I'm going to briefly present the research that we did on developing a socioeconomic risk indicator for identifying vulnerable fossil-dependent regions in the EU. We know that the EU is turning climate neutral, but everyone is not going to be affected the same. So with our research, we identify the vulnerable regions and actors, and we provide insights to policymakers for the design of compensating policies. And our key focus is on the fossil-dependent regions most at risk of losing jobs. So we identify this socioeconomic indicator mainly linked to the loss of jobs and increase of unemployment. Now, a few words on the methodology that we followed. We adopt the latest IPCC AR6 report definition of risk, and we thus build a socioeconomic risk indicator that is based on the sub-indicators of hazard, exposure, and vulnerability to identify the European regions that are at socioeconomic risk because of the low carbon transition. Now, in this graph, you can see how this socioeconomic risk indicator is decomposed into the sub-indicators of hazard, exposure, and vulnerability. Hazard is defined as the change of domestic production in 2050 from the 2015 levels for the fossil fuel related sectors. Exposure is defined as the share of employment in these fossil fuel related sectors compared to the total employment. And then vulnerability is defined by sensitivity and adaptive capacity, each of which are then defined by specific socioeconomic indicators like unemployment rate, GDP per capita, and income per capita to identify how sensitive the region is in these economic shocks. But also investments per capita, the regional competitiveness index, and how the share of population beyond 50 years old in order to identify whether the economy can adjust quickly to the challenges and have an increased adaptive capacity. Now, we run 2,040 100 and 400 weight combinations in order to identify these vulnerable regions. And we find that there is a strong divergence in the risk profiles across the EU regions. 26% of all EU regions, and by EU regions, we define the NUTS2 regions, 26% of all EU regions are ranked at least once, are found at least once in the top 20 positions of the Socioeconomic Risk Index. But only 6%, and this is like 15 regions, are found in the top 20 positions in more than 80% of the weight combinations. So we can tell with high certainty that these regions are at risk of job losses with the low carbon transition. Now, these 15 regions are also found in the top 5 positions. So in the graph, you can see that, for example, Western Macedonia is ranked in all 2,400 combinations in the first position in the Socioeconomic Risk Index, followed by Silesia, and then by the Yugoslav Bulgarian region and the Peloponnese. So you see that the 15 regions that we have identified are the ones that mostly appear in all these 2,400 combinations of the different weights of the sub-indicators. Now, when decomposing the socioeconomic risk indicator, we see that the scores amongst these 15 high-risk regions differentiate mainly due to the exposure, so due to the share of energy jobs. In the graph here, you can see that with the black line, you find the risk index, but then the different red shaded and pink shaded lines indicate the sub-indicators of hazard, exposure, and vulnerability. And we see that indeed exposure strongly follows the socioeconomic risk index pattern. Hazard is equally high in all 15 regions. These 15 regions are characterized by fossil fuel activities, either related to coal extraction and power plants and coal power plants, or by oil and gas extraction and refineries. And we see that the region mostly exposed to these socioeconomic risks are actually those with a high share of direct fossil fuel jobs. Now, here is a table. I'm not going to go into detail in that. You can find it later when we share the presentation, but we see that indeed Western Macedonia has the highest risk index. In the last column, you can find the average of these 2,400 weight combinations, and the risk index for Western Macedonia, for example, is double that of the last 15 regions that are found in the ranking. Silesia has also a very high risk index, and both of these regions share high exposure and a very high share of energy jobs, in total close to 6.5% of total employment. Now, we wanted to focus a bit more on these 15 EU regions that we found to be vulnerable and most at risk of the low carbon transition, and identify some existing challenges that they share. And with regards to the socioeconomic challenges, we see that the GDP per capita of these regions indeed does not exceed the EU average, and is actually significantly lower than the EU average. And also, when comparing the annual growth rates to the national growth rates, we see that they are lower over the entire period of 2010 to 2020. Now, this implies that these regions already since at least 2010, where our data analysis starts, are already lagging behind and face some challenges even before the low carbon transition has intensifies. But also when it comes to unemployment, while most of the regions are close to the EU average, the regions with some regions with a high socioeconomic risk index ranking, and particularly so the Western Macedonia, have among the highest unemployments in the EU. Also for youth unemployment, this is higher than the total unemployment in all EU regions, which is similar to the EU. But for certain regions, like the Greek regions in Western Macedonia and Peloponnese, the difference is large. Also, when it comes to the economic diversification of the regional economies, we find that the picture varies across the different regions. So there's, of course, a high contribution of the energy sector, much above the EU 27 average. Manufacturing has also a higher share than the EU 27, which means that services, and especially the financial and professional services, contribute the least and much less than one we find in the EU average. Similarly, regional employment, when compared to the EU 27, energy is a large employing sector, while financial and professional services employ a much lower share. The EU average, you can see in the last column, is 16%, while for the rest of the 15 region, this is much lower than 10%. So with our analysis, we identified the high risk regions, and with few exceptions, these regions coincide with the regions that are eligible for the Just Transition funds. Only regions in Germany have not been identified as regions at risk, mainly due to their low sensitivity because of good economic performance, but also because of their high adaptive capacity, mainly related to infrastructure in place. When it comes to policy design, most regions at risk are found to be already lagging behind the national growth and employment averages. So there are additional challenges that may aggravate the risks of the low carbon transition. So there is need for tailored support to cope with the transformative and proactively create sustainable economic development. We suggest that compensating and supporting mechanisms could minimize the serious economic impacts and the social inequalities that may come with a low carbon transition, particularly for these regions that we identified as vulnerable. So thank you very much, and looking forward to our interesting discussion.
So I'm going to jump in here. And so thank you, Zoi. That was very interesting, lots of details. I will also remind people that we will be sharing the presentation later on. So you will have lots of chances to check up on things in more detail once we publish that after the webinar. So I'm going to find my own notes. So I'm going to introduce our panelists one after the other, and then hand over to each of them to talk a little bit about how they see things from Zoi's presentation, from their own perspective, as well as to possibly ask her questions directly if they prefer. So I'll start off with Piotr Masłowski. Graduated first from the University of Silesia in Katowice in political science and later postgraduate studies in human resource management. He's a former president of the Center for the Development of Social Initiatives, an NGO activist, and co-founder of the Rybnik Citizens Forum. In 2011, he was appointed to the advisory team at the Office for the President of Poland for financial and legal solutions in the field of social and civic activity. He's currently deputy mayor of Rybnik, responsible for the city's social policy, sports events, contacts with NGOs, and acquisition of external sources of finance. Our second panelist is Olga Knez, who started from a background in aviation and human factors. She joined Katapult Business Incubator in 2020 as a project manager for the various government and EU funded programs that they're doing for emerging entrepreneurs and startups. Her day-to-day work is with new businesses in the Zasavia region, and she has strong insights into the needs of startups in terms of infrastructure. Come up when she's speaking is presenting the incubator and companies to elementary and high school students of the region as a way of inspiring younger generations for thinking more creatively, and also having some pride in Zasavia. And then finally, Karel Tichý has broad experience in regional development of coal regions, just transition, restructuring, business development, innovation, public administration, everything. Karel is the man you want to talk to for everything. From 2016 to 2020, he was part of the national team preparing and implementing the strategy for economic restructuring of Ústí, Moravia, Silesia, and Karlovy Vary regions in the Czech Republic. He's currently a project manager of the Economic and Social Council of the Ústí region and is actively participating in processes related to the implementation and preparation for a just transition mechanism, including intensifying cooperation among Central European coal regions, as well as strategic projects in the field of hydrogen for Ústí. So I would first turn to Piotr as the first panelist, and I would put something out there that maybe you can already turn into a question towards Zoi if you wish, but also you can answer yourself. So we understand that you have quite a lot of experience as a very proactive city within Silesia. You've developed a business center, you're cooperating with the IT sector, you have ambitions of becoming a hub. What would you say are the difficulties you've faced along the way towards your goal of becoming an economic hub, a socio-economic hub for the region? Are there certain challenges that you're still seeking answers to?
How Rybnik works generally. We have a population about 140,000 of inhabitants, and we are located in the southern part of Silesia. It's the one which is most connected with the coal mines. They still play a key role in our area, and we have two mines in Rybnik, and they are combined two mines, and they are scheduled to close only in 2049. So it's a long perspective. It seems to be for the citizens, and they are not afraid about labor market, about the job, and so on and so on. So on one hand, transition is a main challenge for the city government, but on the other hand, it's really difficult. It's really difficult to explain it. And I know that I start as a typical Pole with the complaining, but I must say that it's difficult to transform economy and fight for climate neutrality in the situation of unemployment rate less than 3%. Because people are not interested in retraining, for example. Miners are not interested in retraining due to government guarantees of work in mines and preferential forms of unemployment. Because you can be retired as a coal miner in the age of 50. So it's really preferential type of work, and they are not interested to look for other solutions, look for other branches. They are not interested to looking in other jobs. And the other problem are coal mine damages. When you are an investor, you are not interested in the area which is difficult. I mean that you have to spend much more money to build anything here. It's about problems, but we have appeared some game changer. It's the Pszczyna-Racibórz road. It's our connection with the two-lane access to the motorway. And this new cross-city road has attracted the interest of investors in Rybnik. But we are focused on the new areas. We are thinking about new business profiles. For example, we want to develop in Rybnik extended office spaces. to extend office spaces. We have 2 blocks like that. So we support something what has born naturally in Rybnik, because we are not we have an agglomeration with the population about 500,000 of citizens. It's a Rybnik and the smaller towns around us. So there is, in my opinion, a huge potential to look for this kind of business. I mean, business focused on the external services. And it's something against brain drain, because generally well-educated people from Rybnik and from our coal mine region, they're looking for the jobs in Katowice or Kraków. It's only 100 kilometers from Rybnik, so it's really easy even to go to work and back to home. And yeah, they are looking for the chances in this cities. We have also an IT sector in Rybnik. Hostersi, it's a company from Rybnik, and it's a main partner for the Amazon in our part of Europe. And we have several local IT companies. So we, as a city government, decided to support something like a building society of programmers, freelancers, and so on. We try to support them with the workshops, with the events. We just want to create something like a society of freelancers in Rybnik, using our capacity, using our local resources. We have also an agreement on the opening of the medical university. It's agreement between national government, regional government, and the city government, and we are waiting for the last sign, and we will inform a publicity that we establish a new university. It's a step to change thinking about the Rybnik and a coal mine region. Quite similar idea is a Fraunhofer Center. It's a German center, and they are looking for a place in Silesia, and we are supported by the regional government and by the European funds, and we have a really big chance to have a branch of Fraunhofer Center in Rybnik. But the main problem at the moment is own contribution. It's a challenge because it's about 2 million of euro, so it's quite big amount of money. And I think really interest for you could be our plans connected with the hydrogen. We received a subsidy, and we will buy as a city 20 buses which will fueled by hydrogen. But we decided to build a center of green energy, and we want to use our wastes, our garbage, to produce hydrogen here in Rybnik and to have own fuel, and it's connected with the one of the most rich people in Poland, Zygmunt Solorz, owner of the Polsat Television. He is investor who is interested in developing this kind of production in Rybnik. And what I want
if I might just cut you off, sorry, since we're a little short on time, and I've noticed a couple of interesting connections between what you've said and our other speakers. So hopefully we'll turn it into a dialogue. So sorry about that. We'll give you a moment later on. So what I was going to say is for the hydrogen, we'll get to that in a moment when we're talking with Karel, because I know that Karel is a big proponent of hydrogen as well in his region. But I also want to talk about some interesting things. You have a sort of a celebrity, a well-known person who's bringing in investment to the region. You have the IT sector. And this is something that's mirrored a little bit in Zasavie and with the business incubator. So maybe, Olga, you could speak to that a little bit, that your relationship with Devisoft, for those who don't don't know it, you can say that, say a little bit about their owner, that he's from the region, he wanted to reinvest in the region, that kind of a thing. But also, what is your relationship to Devisoft, the business model that you have between Devisoft and them? And it connects, I think, also to the brain drain, which Piotr mentioned, but it's turning around towards a brain gain. We're
trying to reverse it, yes.
Yeah.
I come from, the Katapult is located in Zasavia region. It's the smallest region in Slovenia and former mining region. Mining halted in 2014, and as Zoi mentioned, being a vulnerable region, it led to the loss of thousands of jobs, not just from the mining, but all the heavy industry here was tied to the mining as well. So one of the more insidious effects of this transition was also this general lack of positivity, or the idea that something can be done or changed. So there was high, and still is very high unemployment among the young. And this just passive behavior and lack of enthusiasm and entrepreneurship in the area. Piotr also mentioned this lack of interest for reskilling. And I'm sure to say that the biggest change maker was Devisoft. Devisoft is the leading global data acquisition company. So they are into measurements. They develop software and hardware for measurement devices for different industries. And yeah, at the time they employ more than 250 people in I think 15 subsidiaries globally. The owner, as George mentioned, he's a local, and basically all the founders wanted to give something back to the region that they come from and that the region where they were educated. So in 2015, they were already well established. They decided to form the business incubator. What Devisoft has is obviously know-how in not just in high tech, but also in business, in global business. They have high tech testing equipment, their own laboratory, which I think is one of the best in the country. And they've invested in other machinery and infrastructure as well. So as George said, it's an interesting model. They wanted to be independent from suppliers, and this is also cost effective. So they invested in pick and place line. This is for printed circuit boards. As I mentioned, they invested in testing laboratory. They have their own milling. So all the production, development, testing is done in Devisoft in-house. But because this very high-end and very expensive equipment is not used to full capacity, they decided to offer that to startups as well. And this was the idea behind the Katapult, the business incubator, to give back and to offer the knowledge, the connections, the networks that they have globally, and the infrastructure, and to offer that to startups. How this was catapulted, we say, was that in 2015, a local company, Chipolo, they secured 300,000 funding, funds on Kickstarter for it's a small pennant that's Bluetooth connected to your smartphone to find your keys. And when you're successful Kickstarter, and then you need to deliver a good product. And at the time, the development was not finished. They had no production facilities. They lacked a lot of resources. So this is when Devisoft stepped in. Devisoft, the company, gave them space. They helped them with the production facilities, helped them with they say 10 times 5 minutes of advice about export tariffs, how you export to Russia, transit pricing. So that was for Devisoft to give was very little, but for Chipolo, it was instrumental at that time. Today, Chipolo, which is housed here in Katapult, employs around 100 people. They have an annual revenue of 6 million. So that's one of our success stories. And then Devisoft said, if we can do this for one company, we can do this for other startups as well. So that was basically the idea behind it. So it's we don't Katapult itself does not invest in startups, or it doesn't take equity share from the startups that we support, but we give them space, mentoring, basically smart money infrastructure for prototyping, and I think we are still the only accelerator incubator in Slovenia that's specialized in hardware product. So yeah.
Oh, thank you very much, Olga. I had the pleasure to visit the facilities, and it's very nice. It's not just about technology. Despite Chipolo, they have a few other things. I remember some guy with a chainsaw making sculptures out of trees, or pulp, using pulp for things. So it's something that could be used, and really it's not the technology, it's the mentoring that seems to be what's effective there. I think let's switch then to Ústí. I'm not sure, Karel, you can tell us if you have something like a startup incubator, if you feel a startup incubator could help. But I also know that you want to talk about the hydrogen as a strong driver for the diversification that you're doing in Ústí region, and maybe this then ties back to what Piotr was saying as well.
Definitely, thank you, George. I will definitely answer your question or follow up the topics you have come up to. But first of all, I'd like to thank Zoi for her findings. And honestly speaking, I got some ambivalent feelings because I don't know if I'm happy of these findings or not, because they are just very right. Yeah, and I can say that altogether with us today is also Tomáš Burdych from the level of Ministry of Regional Development of Czech Republic, who is now involved in the restart strategy, the strategy George has been talking about when introducing me, the strategy which was developed already back in 2016. And in the 2016, according to our analysis, the findings were very same, Zoi. Yeah. So when you are making this analysis now, it's telling us that the situation is still the same, and quite nothing new and nothing better had happened to all the three coal regions in transition, or let's say disadvantaged coal regions, as we call it here in Czech Republic. Yeah, definitely. So that's the situation. I will follow up the topics George has come up to. Regarding some kind of business incubator, or let's say supporting the startup activities in the region, yeah, I can confirm that these are definitely the matter of interest here in the Ústí region. We got a so-called innovation center of Ústí region. It's a, let's say, special dedicated organization which is supporting, let's say, business development in various fields, including startups in, let's say, the emerging areas like, let's say, culture and creative industry. Speaking of that, I can say that also these branches will be supported through the Just Transition Fund, which is just about to be, let's say, implemented here in Czech Republic. We are now waiting for the very final approval of the operational program through which the money will be flowing into the region, and or not just in all the three regions. And we do hope that by the end of this year, the first calls will be open. Regarding hydrogen, Ústí region has a, let's say, really strong history in hydrogen production and its usage. The hydrogen has been produced as a, let's say, byproduct here in the region already more than 100 years ago. And let's say the tradition sustain, the Ústí region is still, let's say, the energy and the chemical heart of the Czech Republic. Around thousands of tons of so-called gray hydrogen are now being produced in the region, and there are a number of projects which are dedicated to production of green hydrogen in the pipeline related not just to the Just Transition Fund, but also to the Modernization Fund. And we do see that, let's say, the interest of the investors and companies in the hydrogen field is increasing day by day. Yeah. So even if we are in the middle, or I don't know, in the middle or the beginning of the energy crisis, I can say that I'm quite optimistic for the future, because let's say the movement we are seeing now and the changes in the approach of the companies, of the society, is quite positive. Yeah, definitely. You know, just last week, I have been participating in a new mobility congress in Lodz, where this topic was also open, the classical chicken-egg questions relating to development of the hydrogen economy. What will be first, if we will have the, let's say, application part of the hydrogen in mobility, for example, or we should have the infrastructure like the refilling station, which can be able to support and power the mobility. So, and I was quite happy that in Lodz it was very open, and one of the guy from Poland, Tomoho Umeda, leading the one of the hydrogen association in Poland, was stating that yeah, in the regions where the hydrogen, even gray, is now available, we should use it as a, let's say, starter for the, let's say, clean energy future. In our region, when talking about let's say producing green hydrogen, Piotr, we are definitely also thinking and preparing projects relating to producing hydrogen from waste. It's strongly connected also with Poland, but because it's a project related to the company, part of the Orlen holding from Poland, company Orlen Unipetrol, which is seated in the city of Litvinov in Ústí region. These are quite major investments planned worth, let's say, hundreds of millions of euros. So definitely it will be heavily funded, mostly from, let's say, private equity, private money, and, let's say, private loans, because, let's say, the money from the Just Transition Fund will be insufficient. And yeah, there are a number of projects in pipeline related to production of green hydrogen from electrolysis using photovoltaics and electrolyzers for producing hydrogen. When everything will be running smoothly, we can await that by 2030 we will have the capacities equal to 20,000 tons of green hydrogen production per year. Yeah, which is also in line with our hydrogen strategy of the Ústí region, which we have established as a part of the transition activities within the region just this year. So, George, these are just a few remarks from my side.
No, thank you. Very, very informative. I keep on learning more and more about Ústí. I'm working with Karel intensely in the Western Balkan Exchange, and I had a chance to visit there, but always nice to learn even more. I will point people in the chat. There was a mention of online events that will be about hydrogen Ústí region, also in English, so everyone can check that out. I want to turn it back to Zoi, who gave us the initial impulse to see if you have any particular response that you would have to these panelists, the things that they're doing, the investments they're making. Maybe you want to respond to the questions that were aimed at reskilling a little bit. Although I will say that we are intending to have a future webinar dedicated just towards reskilling. So this this webinar is maybe a little bit more oriented towards business development, but of course they're tied together. So Zoi.
Thanks. Thank you, George, and to all the panelists. This was a very positive, well, not surprise, because I know that the regions have been working towards that direction, but it leaves a very good feeling after my presentation, where I presented all the risks and the challenges that these regions have to face. It's good to see that there are strong efforts towards the direction of economic diversification and new investments, and especially to hear about new sectors like hydrogen. Of course, this is an emerging energy carrier, very much linked also to the new REPowerEU plan by the European Commission, and we know that it will play an important role in the future energy system. And I heard 2 of the 3 regions really mentioning the hydrogen investments, but also in other sectors, machinery, new industries, but also research and also medical services. So this is great. And from our research, we know that going towards the direction of economic diversification is key. Now, of course, reskilling, as you said, is another challenge, and especially for the regions that have a population that is an aging population above 50 years old. This is a real challenge. But we can see that there could be some brain gain. So even people coming back to their home country, home region, if these activities emerge.
Thank you, Zoi. Then I think maybe since you're talking about the brain drain, then we'll take it back to Piotr, who also started talking about brain drain as well. What would you say? Do you see that any of these the things that have been talked about from Olga or from Karel, how valid do you think those are? Do you have an incubator? Are you relying only on the green hydrogen, or are you expanding also to gray hydrogen? Are there overlaps? And I'll point to these questions from the audience as well. How do you see the connections between these new investments and new businesses and reskilling? Is there an opportunity for current workers?
In my opinion, main problem is that we are focused on the coal miners. Why? I mean that we have to focus on their kids. Because, as I said, as I mentioned earlier, they have guarantees, yes, governmental guarantees that they will work as coal miners until they will be retired. So kids are strictly connected with the brain drain. And in my opinion, it's something like a gap, because we can have accelerators, incubators, and so on, but it's not enough, because so it's not easy. And I represent Rybnik, which is quite good practice. But around us, there are towns like Rybnik, like Radlin, Redutowe, with the number of inhabitants about 20,000. For them, coal mine is everything. In Radlin, for example, they have coke plant and the coal mine, and it's about 20% of the town area. So it's a huge challenge, and in the moment we have no answer for that. I hope that the cities like Rybnik, which are bigger and are much more, we have a labor market much more diversified, we can help them, but it's not enough at the moment, in my opinion.
Then I would then turn it to Olga as well to see if you have any final words, 1-2 minutes, responses to what has been said from others. Do you feel that it's unique, your situation?
I agree completely with Piotr that we need to focus on the children of the miners, because here also the miners retired very young. One interesting fact is also that these jobs were highly well paid, and also the pensions are well paid. And this generation of retired miners can still support their children, even when children are not working, which has also led to low interest in finding jobs to some extent. So what we are trying to do, when I mentioned that I have a passion for, well, that one of the aspects of my job that I really enjoy is this visits from high school children, well, elementary school children and high schools, is we're trying to inspire the children already for technical vocations, for working to learn skills, to study engineering for STEM subjects, because I'm sure we're not unique in Slovenia in the fact that we have really a lack of engineers and a large number of unemployed young with degrees in social studies. So this is what, as Piotr say, one incubator cannot solve the problem of a region, but we're thinking big. We're thinking on a national level as well. And the owner of Katapult is also working with the governments to change policies, to introduce tax, not low taxes, but to implement policies that would encourage entrepreneurship. So that's one of the aspects that an accelerator that really knows the needs of the market in terms of products, in terms of employees, that can maybe make global changes when they join in the efforts on a political scale as well.
Thank you, Olga. And I'll give a final word from our panelists to Karel to reflect further on what you see for the Ústí region. 1 or 2 minutes.
You know, there's let's say, a large number of challenges ahead of us. I think that the largest one, which is strongly connected with the current situation in Europe, is the fact that, of course, everybody knows and is aware that there's some need to change and to transform. But in fact, it is a question when the transformation will have to happen. Yeah, because as you know, the demand for coal is rising. So, for example, the coal mining companies operating here in the Ústí regions, they have sold out or their production extraction of coal for the next 2 years. So that will be, let's say, the largest challenge for us to keep the pace and, let's say, some kind of transformation and enthusiasm here in the region, because it will not be easy. And it's, I think, also important question for the European level, how to tackle this problem. Just before this webinar, I've been all together with George taking part in the Committee of the Region consultation regarding the future of the Just Transition Fund, Just Transition Fund 2.0. And from my point of view, the, let's say, most important impacts and largest impacts of the transition will be real after 2030 here in the Ústí region. So maybe we are now a bit ahead of time, and we have to use this time wisely, when preparing for future.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think that's a good, nice quote as well. We have to use our time wisely. I think this is something that we can all agree on, and hopefully the just transition plans that have been developed have wise actions in them. We'll have to see. Unfortunately, we're out of time for the questions. We have some interesting questions. And I see about the energy emergency from Csaba in Hungary. So unfortunately, we won't have time to answer them. We'll see if we can perhaps get them answered and put it as part of our post-webinar blog. But what I will say, also drawing on what Karel was saying about the response from the Commission towards things, Julian, if you could put on the screen the presentation again. Just one small thing that we've been requested to do the Exchange EU. This is a program that the Commission has promoted and is funding. ICLE is also part of it as well. So I just wanted to let you know this is something that if you're not involved, you can definitely get involved. An exchange program with other EU regions. Unfortunately, non-EU regions are not allowed to apply, but there's a pre-matchmaking session next week. The deadline to apply for it is very soon, I believe in 2 days. European Week of Regions and Cities, there will be a session. And if you're going to be at the Just Transition Platform Conference in Brussels on the 25th, there's going to be an in-person session that you can join, but we would ask you to register in advance. So this is your chance to be able to learn from each other. This is how I met Olga when I was leading an exchange and we went to Zasavie. We had a similar one where I went to Ústí for a different program. So I think this is very valuable. I would encourage, Rybnik was not in there, so maybe Rybnik will want to join into the program this time around. So there's the links. Thank you, Linda, for those. So anyone who wants to learn more about it, you can do so with those links. And with that, I would thank everybody for joining, especially Zoi, our keynote speaker, Piotr, Olga, and Karel as our panelists and giving their reflections. An hour is not enough to talk about everything we need to talk about for economic diversification or for the just transition. So we will see you again. We're planning on our next webinar in November, still to be determined when exactly and what it will be, but I invite you to subscribe, to follow on Twitter and on LinkedIn to find out what exactly we will be doing. And thank you all for attending and for the questions. Thank you.
Thank you all, George,
Thank
and
you.
all the rest of the team. Have a nice day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.